Hello, it's Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, shooting from the Lugnutz facility. And it's been a while since I've done a shop walk. And today we just happen to have an interesting assortment of cars. And I think it's significant in that, each one is pretty distinct, reflects their national identity, and has unique design and styling and engineering that is of a period and also a place of the country. So I think it's a really neat group of cars, and I'll just maybe walk you through what we're doing to each of these. I think it's kind of a cool collection. So this is a 1978 Mercedes 450 SLC. So this was the except for the 6.9 sedan, the top of the line Mercedes, and it was the S-Class Coupe. Unusually for this car, or for Mercedes, normally their S-Class Coupe was based on the sedan, but for this, the 107, the S-Class Coupe was based on the SL sports car. So the R107 is the sports car, R being roadster, and to make it an SLC, they extended the wheelbase 10 or 12 inches, put in rear seats, and put in these kind of nifty louvers in the side of the window, which were somewhat controversial when it was new. So they made these cars from 73 up until 81, and then the W126 S-Class Coupe replaced it. So these are neat cars. Some versions of these cars were competed in international rallies, and it was, from the motoring enthusiasts of the day, it was praised for its performance and ride and handling and so on. A very strong, durable, tough car. So with all of these cars, they have some weaknesses. There's always some parts of it that are difficult to service, or some parts that were known to give trouble. And then when they're, decades old, you wind up having to go in and replace all these things. And usually all of the cars out there have the same problem. So with this car, the one problem area that you hear is the climate control servo. And this is in the early era of electronic controls and computer power and so on. And so these early electronic systems give a lot of trouble. And particularly there was, I don't know where I put it, but there's the climate control servo, which lived there. And it was a vacuum operated device that took signals from temperature sensors and then diverted water flow with a bunch of vacuum operated valves, and the housing in it always cracked and the coolant leaked in all over the mechanism to control the valves, and they basically all fail and they're out of production. So what we did here is, there's a company, if you can get a look at this here, is that they replace all of that mechanical system with a printed circuit board and a black box. And then that ties into the original system, and it's just a lot more reliable. It's a little bit messy right now, and we're going to clean up some of these vacuum hoses, but we installed that as a retrofit kit in this car. And then of course these old radios, which are also early electronic. This one had a Becker Mexico in it, the Mexico being the one with the tape player in it, as opposed to the Grand Prix, which just was the radio, or Europa. Europa was the radio, and Mexico was the radio and cassette. So that's getting shipped away to a company in New Jersey, and then we'll reinstall it. And then this car is almost ready to go. So we did some of these pieces in the rear underneath. They're heavily corrosion susceptible, and so we replaced all those pieces, and we had some bad bodywork in the front fender, and so we actually replaced this whole front fender. So did a little bit of work on this car. It was an original Calgary car, sold into Eagle Ridge, basically one family owned, two owners for the last 30 years in one family. And it's just a nice original car. And these these SLs, you know, one of the things that happens to most of them is the dash cracks, and they just crack along those center air vents, and that is very difficult to replace. You know, the dash alone is like $2,500 US, plus you have to rip it out. So it's like a $5,000 repair. So this interior was in nice shape. It had 125,000 kilometers. It had some corrosion issues, like it's not rusty, but you know, somewhere along the lines, somebody did some poor work on the front fender, and then we did the rear of it. So this will turn out to be a really nice car. This is an 86 Jaguar XCS SC. This is the Targa, and the Targa was actually designed or built by Tickford, the same company that originally made Aston Martins. The DB24 range, they were made in the Tickford family. I've been driving this for a year. It was a friend's car, friend's dad's car, and we just sold it into the Netherlands. So there's a doctor there who is not a great supply. There's a lot more XJSs in nice shape in North America than in Europe, and so he's thought it worth the trouble to put this in a container, and it's going from Calgary to the Netherlands. The 2CV is a new addition. This car was imported from France, I think about 15 years ago. It went to Victoria, and then it went to Calgary, and it looks nice, but it has had some issues with the floor and the sill. So if you want to get that, and so we are just buying some new panels for it and retrofitting some new parts. Thankfully, just about every piece for a Citroen 2CV is available. They made like 4 million of them, and they're still, you know, a popular classic, affordable classic car. So we order all these parts from the UK, and so we'll be sort of rebuilding the floor and sill area of this car. The rest of it's okay. Drive line's nice, and it drives really nicely. This is an 81 Porsche 928 5-speed. It was sold new to Vancouver. It's a one-owner car, and it only has 25,000 kilometers on it. It was driven for a few years, from like 81 to I think 82 to 83, even 1 year, and then it was put away, and so it hadn't started in like 40 years. I drove it for the first time like a couple of weeks ago. But with any car, if it's been sitting that long, you know, you need to take a careful look at, you know, all the water hoses and belts and so on. The 928s, you need to do the timing belt and the water pump probably every 5 years, at least every 10 years. So we've got the whole front of the engine apart here, and we can see the timing belt here that needs to be replaced. But to do that, there's an awful lot of disassembly on the front of the car, and this front crank pulley needs to come off to gain access to everything. And while you're doing the belts, you know, this is the water pump, and you might as well do that because it's going to start leaking as well. So there's a lot of work on doing the belts and water pump on a 928. This is a very maintenance-intensive car, and you know, while we're here, you know, the V12 in the XJS isn't a picnic either. So, you know, these are both really wonderful cars, the XJS and the 928, but anything you do to it takes a lot of time. With an XJS, at least the parts are cheap. With a 928, everything you do takes a lot of time, and every part is extremely expensive. I once reconditioned a 928, and the bill for the reconditioning, not including the car, was $75,000. And there are some 928s, they're automatic, that have an issue with the pressure being put on the crankshaft, which dislodges it from the bearing, and the crankshaft migrates its way through the crankcase of the engine. And actually that happened to me. That's for automatic 928s. This is a manual, so it's not, this car didn't have that problem. But anyway, 928s can be fearsomely expensive. This one's only done 25,000 kilometers. It's in beautiful shape. And then we've got the water pump, and then, you know, this big box of parts to replace all the rubber hoses and so forth. And basically you call this car a recommissioning, just because it's sat for 40 years. This will be a really nice car when it's done. We have to get it working, we have to make it reliable, we have to do a bunch of stuff, a bunch of disassembly, but it'll be nice when it's done. Over here we have a Series 3 Jaguar E-Type. We restored this car over about 3-4 years ago, and it's back in for service. It had a fuel vaporization problem, which they're known for. It went to Medicine Hat, where it's like 40 degrees. The fuel started percolating because of the underbody heat. And then it was adjusted to fix that, but kind of went out of adjustment, so now we're getting it back here to try to sort it out again. Yeah, these cars did suffer from the fuel overheating in traffic, even when they were new. So we're going to try to figure out something for the customer in Medicine Hat to solve that problem, insulating some fuel lines and maybe getting some more airflow through the engine, even though it does have a big electric auxiliary fan. Up here we have a 300 SL Gullwing. You can see the beautiful racing style. This is from 1956. Fin drum brakes. It is getting wheel cylinders, and we did some work on the brake booster on that. When you have these valuable collector cars, they sit around, and when you try to drive them, often they'll have problems from non-use, and so we're going in and just sorting out the brakes on this car. Over here, we have this Range Rover, and this is called an L322, so it's 03 to 2011. And many people feel this is like the best Range Rover, or as we now say, peak Range Rover, just because it was the last one that was square rigged and full size. Even though they're nice and comfortable and fancy interiors and so on, this model had more thought to utility than some of the later ones, which are almost pure luxury cars. So guys like Harry Metcalf and Jeremy Clarkson have them on their farms and put sheep in the back and so on. They rust. So with these cars, they're not aluminum like some of the early Rovers. They have steel fenders, and they tend to rust in the arches, and so we didn't want this one to start rusting, and so we've taken off the rear bumper, and then we're going to look for any corrosion, get a wire wheel, grind it off, put some 415 rust paint in it, and then respray it, just to make sure that if the corrosion starts, it doesn't go anywhere. So we've taken all these pieces off here. We're cleaning it up with a pressure blaster and degreaser, and then we're going to hit it with some dry ice, then grind off any of the corrosion. And you can see that this one started a little bit here, so we've already started on this area just to clean it up. And if you look inside, you can see there's a little bit of corrosion there. So we'll make sure that we clean all of that up. Like a little spot like this doesn't look like much, but if you leave it alone, it'll become a pretty big rust spot. Eventually you'll get a hole in it, and when that sort of happens, then the car is a beater. So if you take some time and take all these pieces off, you can drop down all the liners, and you can get in there and clean everything up, and that just preserves the car. This is a Euro Mercedes-Benz 500E. We sold it on a green trailer, and it's on its way to California. And we're going to do some more cryo on it. The owner wants the underside really blasted. And so we're going to do that before it goes down to its new owner in California. So it's kind of a full house. We have everything from just selling cars on behalf of clients to doing body work and rust repair to servicing clients' cars like the Gullwing and the E-Type. And then the rest of the cars are our cars that we buy, fix up, and sell. And then, they constantly rotate. Of course, we get to drive them a little bit in the meantime. So anyway, it's just, when you go to a supermarket and you try to find your car, and sometimes you can't even do that because all the cars are the same. But when you look back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, each of these cars are completely different from one another, both aesthetically and the mechanical layouts and the way the driving experiences that they offer. So it's really fun to spend the morning driving a 2CV and then hop in a V12 Jaguar and take a Gullwing for a drive, and then an E-Type and a 500E, and pull your trailer with a Range Rover on the weekend. So anyway, I hope that was interesting. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. Lromanosky from Calgary, Canada.